Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, if you can use Firefox or Chrome browsers, you're going to have a much better experience with this webinar software. If you miss anything, we will send a replay recording tomorrow. And do enter those questions in the chat area throughout for Lori, and we'll get to as many as we can by the end of the webinar. Also, if you're having any connectivity issues, you can use that red reconnect button at the top of your screen. Sometimes logging out and coming back in helps too. And with that, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Caroline from Boardable. You can see our website there at the bottom. You've probably heard of Lori before because she is such an expert in this field of legacy giving with nonprofit fundraising. But if you haven't heard of Boardable, we are a central location where you can coordinate all these big endeavors that we are trying to do with our boards, and you can store documents, plan your meetings, agendas, minutes, all that good stuff, online voting, e-signature. Give us a try with a free trial at boardable.com. And with that, I would like to formally welcome Lori Kranczer. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Just for a bit of, this is real life here. I have a couple of kids walking around. So if you see that, I apologize. Everyone's home from school. Okay. So today we are talking about how to engage your board in legacy giving. And this is really one of the most important things you can do to have a sustainable, successful program. You need to have your board involved in your program really for it to grow and scale. You can always try to piece together something, but when you have your board involved, that is really where it's going to soar. So I want to get into that today. A little bit about me. I'm just going to go to the next slide, but a little about me. So I am an attorney and a fundraiser for 20 years now. I work with nonprofits all over the world, essentially helping them build out legacy giving programs. I've taught at NYU and Yeshiva University, and I'm teaching widely on all topics related to legacy giving, helping people grow their programs. So you are in the right place if you understand that legacy giving is an important part of a fundraising program. You also understand that your board is the foundation of a successful program. We're going to show you all the ways that you can create that within your own program. And you want to learn why the board is instrumental to your legacy program and learn some tactics on how to improve their engagement. Because if you've ever seen me teach plan giving concepts before, I like to teach not only the concepts, but also things that you can take away and you could actually put together right after our call. So there will be lots of actionable items for you to have. Okay, I'm just going to turn my video off so everyone can concentrate on the slides, but I am certainly here. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And Carolyn will also interrupt me if I need to answer a question right away, or we can get to the questions at the end. So what you're going to learn today is why legacy giving is important to the organization. It's absolutely vital. Why your board is key to a sustainable program. And I highlight in blue sustainable. That's the key here. And you're going to be able to identify your board's style and their interest. And in this way, we'll figure out how you can involve your board depending on what their interests are. So let's get started. So what is legacy giving? So I'm not sure what everyone's experience is regarding legacy giving in development. So I just want to go through a few slides and show you why it's so important to do legacy giving in organizations. So legacy giving, most people think of it as bequests, right? And certainly most of the legacy gifts, true legacy gifts coming in through bequests are in the form of a bequest. Not going to talk about plan giving vehicles right now, but when you think about legacy giving, take a step back from the type of gift vehicle it is and think about what it really encompasses, okay? It is an impactful gift. It is the donor's ultimate gift to your organization, no matter what it looks like, no matter if it's in a bequest or a gift of art, setting up a trust, whatever it looks like. We're not thinking about the gift vehicle necessarily. We're thinking about the impact that the donor wants to make. And that's why point number 2 is donor-centric. This is all about the donor. Now, yes, of course, it needs to align with the organization, the values of the organization, the programs, but this gift is very personal to your donor, okay? So it is donor-centric. It uses all assets and complex planning, so it really can be any type of gift vehicle to be a legacy gift. It doesn't have to be a bequest. It could be lots of other different things. And of course, it could be current or deferred. So this is where sometimes some people get tripped up. They think deferred gifts are, the legacy gifts. We won't receive this gift for 20 or 30 years from now. So therefore, we need to concentrate on receiving legacy or planned gifts now, currently. And that's actually not true. So legacy gifts can be made currently that go right into your annual campaign, if that's the way you're set up, or into your endowment, or they can be deferred. So there's lots of different ways that a donor can make a legacy gift. And when I say legacy gift, that also includes planned gifts, right? So any type of gift that requires some sort of planning, anything outside of cash or securities, marketable securities. But this is a really great tool for you to grow your program, your overall development program. So why legacy giving? So you have probably seen these numbers before, but it's, I think, important to repeat them, that charitable bequests in the United States were 10% of fundraising in 2019. And that was a little more than $43 billion. So when you think about your own giving, right, your own development program, are you receiving 10% of your budget each year from legacy gifts? And that is really a number to strive to. So what a typical development program would look like, is going from having a very strong annual campaign. Now, you absolutely have to have a strong annual campaign. You cannot have a robust development program without an annual campaign. You start with your annual campaign, and then you start to develop out a legacy program. Legacy gifts are individual gifts, okay? So they are not a complete siloed gift. It should be part of your development program. It shouldn't be in its own program where you're not communicating between annual and legacy, because your legacy donors will likely come from your annual donors. So you need to build up your annual campaign, and those donors, the individuals in your donor base for the annual campaign, and then you'll start to understand which donors would make a legacy gift. Not every donor will do a legacy gift. And even not every donor on your board will do a legacy gift. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. So that's really the best way to build out your program. And ultimately, what you want to do with all this, annual, then legacy, is to really build your endowment. Your endowment is what is going to provide that fiscal stability for your organization for decades to come. Okay, so that is the true legacy for your organization. So that is essentially, this is to deal with individuals, annual to legacy to endowment. Okay, so why is legacy so important for organizations? So just how you understand this, and this is really important because these concepts are things you can also speak with your board about, because your board may not quite understand why legacy is so important. Now, they may know that there are larger gifts. That's probably the first reason that people think about when they think about legacy giving, why it's important, because they tend to be larger gifts. It's the donor's ultimate gift. Perhaps they're making small annual gifts or modest-sized gifts throughout their life, and then they leave this really large bequest. That I wouldn't say it's necessarily typical, but that is a scenario that most people think about. So it's true that legacy gifts are, I don't have the stats in front of me, but the legacy gifts tend to be 50 to 5,000 times the size of someone's annual gift. So they tend to be large. So that's pretty important for your organization, especially to know about that. Then to have the knowledge of a pipeline of significant assets. Now, this is important for not only to plan out your programs for the future, to know what funds are coming in per decade. And I've done that within organizations to map it out. When you have these legacy gifts that you know are in a pipeline, because your donors are still with us, right? They're still alive, but you know that there's this pipeline of bequests coming in or other types of assets that are potentially restricted now, but they'll be unrestricted for use later on. That could be used towards particular programs, facilities, general operating expenses, all of that. So not only will your program staff really appreciate that, but I'm sure your CFO and your controller would like that, as well as your board. Okay, so this is very important for your board to understand. Okay, just taking a sip of water. So then budget relief is really important also. So legacy giving provides budget relief. And in a year like this past year, that was very important for many organizations that had a robust program and had some difficulty with their annual campaign, which was, kind of typical this past year, unfortunately. Many organizations' galas were canceled or their events that they were dependent on. So when you have a robust program, an ongoing legacy program, it will provide budget relief in the years that you're not quite getting to goal. And that happens. And so that's just part of the financial planning for your organization. So this is also important relief for anyone in your organization that deals with finances, and as well as your board, like your treasurer would have that information also. So that would be important to them. It also grows the endowment, which I mentioned before. So if you have a surplus that comes in through a bequest or another type of legacy gift, and it's not necessary to be used towards the annual campaign or anything that you have going on right now, you should have something that a board resolution, so this is where your board would get involved and have a resolution or some sort of business rule that would put a surplus of money that you don't need to go into endowment. Okay, so this is where your board would get involved also to discuss this. That would be, it would have to be a board resolution or something decided by the board. So it could be, say, any surplus or unrestricted bequests that come in, maybe 10% goes into growing the endowment. So this is what you can put into place. That would be with your board. Broader base of donors. Excuse me. So this is also another important thing to know, especially as fundraisers, that when you offer, and you would use this through your gift acceptance policy, which is something your board would sign off on and decide on. Within your gift acceptance policy, you would offer different opportunities for your donors to do gifts for your organization. And that could be gifts of real estate. It could be artwork. It could be a trust or other types of gift vehicles. So the gift vehicles that you are providing as opportunities for your donors to give to you will broaden your base of donors that can make a substantial gift. And I'll give you a quick example. I worked with an organization that had a donor that could only make modest gifts during their lifetime because of their income. And because usually when you give from annual campaigns, you're giving from income. But they had an asset that they really wanted to give to the organization because they felt really connected to the organization. So they had jewelry, which was worth about $12,000. They didn't have any sentimental value anymore. So they decided to give that as a gift. And so they have broadened their base of donors, this organization, by allowing these other types of gifts come in. Okay, so this is an important factor. And that would, I think, be very important to your development staff to understand that, how it broadens the base of donors, but it's certainly important for your board to know as well. Financial security for the future, certainly, this is one of your board's fiduciary duties. So this is very important to your board as well. And so when you have a robust program that gifts are coming in year after year, you can rely on these assets coming in, because once you have a mature program, and mature could be maybe 5 years out of being consistent in growing your program, you can actually project the amount of funds coming in to your organization year after year, believe it or not. So no, we can't control when a bequest is realized, meaning when a donor unfortunately passes away. But after a while, when you have a built out pipeline, you will be able to project. I wouldn't say it's an exact science, but it's more of an art, but you would be able to project what the streams of income that will be able to come in. And this is, of course, important to the organization and your board. And the enhanced relationship, this is what's important also for your organization, is that it enhances the relationship with your donors. And by having an enhanced relationship with your donor does mean that, of course, our donors are happier, they're being stewarded, recognized, but they also tend to leave larger gifts, either potentially legacy gifts, and also their annual gifts tend to go up as well because they are being recognized and given they're part of a stewardship program for legacy giving, they feel more invested in the organization. So it will enhance your relationship with your existing donors. And this is really overall looking at the scope of why legacy giving is so important for an organization. So here is a quick poll. Is your board involved in legacy giving, or are they not involved with legacy giving right now? You can go ahead and put that in a poll. Carolyn, I don't see it on my screen, but if you can let me know when the poll is up and if people are answering the polls and what the responses are.
Okay, I'm going to just type this in here real quick. Is your board involved? We'll just do yes or no.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, let's publish that puppy and see how we do.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see the results of this. I always feel like, yeah, everyone's board should be involved, and it's not always the case. So there's
looking like about 75 to 80 no. 20 to
folks. Okay, folks, we're gonna help you with that. So there's lots of tactics going to get to. All right. So the people that have an involved board, that's wonderful. Keep them engaged. There's going to be a lot of things I'm going to go through, different tactics as we continue talking that you can, if you're not already using, feel free to use to further engage your board. And the folks that don't have an engaged board, not to worry. Many times when you start out with legacy giving, that is the case, and we're going to fix that. Okay, so let's move on. So your board has certain responsibilities, and these are just 3 that I'm outlining right here that we're going to talk about for legacy giving. So with all your board responsibilities, let's talk about fiduciary responsibilities as a donor and as a solicitor. Now, I know there's a lot of other responsibilities that they have. This is not a board engagement type of overall board engagement session. I just want to focus on the legacy portions of this. So as a fiduciary of the board, your board is a fiduciary, their role as a fiduciary can include responsibilities such as ensuring adequate resources, managing them effectively, and strengthen the organization's programs and services. So when you think about legacy giving and their fiduciary responsibilities, this fits in perfectly, right? So legacy giving is an essential part of these. So for example, endowment, and before of which gift vehicles or assets will you actually accept, they're all within the scope of the board. These are all policies that need to be approved by the board. So you can see that if you don't have an involved board at this point, you cannot move forward with doing an endowment or gift acceptance policy to be able to offer your donors different gift vehicles, which would be beneficial for your donors and for you as the organization. So this is why it's really critical to have your board involved. They are a fiduciary. It's essentially, they owe it to the organization to do this type of work. So to ensure adequate resources, once you have, I can't even think of a better way to ensure adequate resources to the organization by offering legacy gifts. So by offering legacy gifts, it really grows your endowment and your pipeline for future gifts. So that is so important to make sure that the organization has adequate resources for the future. Same thing with managing them effectively through their investment committee. If you have an investment committee of the board, they should be managed through them. And it really strengthens the organization's programs and services by having legacy gifts that perhaps have an endowment that supports a particular program, that donors give restricted bequests towards certain programs. So this really, and by offering legacy gifts and building that pipeline, will strengthen the organization's programs and services. So all of this really relates to legacy giving when you think about it. And, the boards, sometimes they're not really understanding that. So we need, as staff, really as professionals, to talk about with our boards. And I'm going to share at the end some tips on how to bring things up with the board. But if your board has a concern or they are thinking about this, you can certainly bring this up to them as their role as a fiduciary, why legacy giving is important and they should be involved. So your board as the donor, So your legacy donors are the organization's most engaged donors. So just for a little bit of a snapshot about what a legacy donor looks like, your legacy donors for your organization, I mentioned before, they're in there already. They are your individual donors, right? It comes from individual giving, but not every donor that gives towards your annual campaign or as an individual will do a legacy gift. A legacy donor is basically your most engaged donor. And that could look different for every organization. But the one thing that is the common thread is that most organizations have a board that's involved, and those donors are the most engaged donors. The board is, right? If they're sitting on the board, you would think they're the most engaged donors. So this is where your first legacy donors should come from. All right. So if you have, and of course, it depends on your board. You, of course, will have engaged donors in other segmented lists of your donor base. You may have your engagement may look different depending on your organization. I have clients that have donors that whenever they buy certain tickets to an event or they participate in a particular program, that is showing engagement. So whatever that looks like for you, but the board is they should be your most engaged donors. Okay. So your board should do a legacy gift. Each of them should do a legacy gift. There should be an expectation of the board to do a legacy gift, whatever that looks like for that board member. And one thing that I always recommend is to do a board giving policy. And, that may take a change of culture or some conversations with your board to actually create that and enact that. But it's really important. And the organizations that I see that do that wind up with 100% participation of their board in legacy giving. And what your board giving policy should include is not only their expectation of their donation each year to the annual campaign and whatever else you may have in your policy, such as buying tickets for the gala. One organization had that, or supporting certain events, whatever that looks like for your organization, that's fine. But there should be something in there that also expresses that the board, perhaps not in the first year of the service because they're new to the board, maybe it's the second year or the third year, depending on your board term limits, but it should say that the donor or the board member should make a legacy gift that is personally significant to them. This way, you're not going to get in, the conflict of board members that can give in different amounts. So it's a personally significant gift. The donor, the board member, does not even have to tell you the amount. Many legacy donors either they don't know the amount or they don't share the amount with the organization. But unless you're having, we could talk about a campaign as a completely different thing, but as a general rule, as a board giving policy for a legacy giving program, an ongoing program, you should try to have a policy enacted. And if you do, you'll go from having maybe 10 to 20% of your board doing a legacy gift, which is very common in the first year or two that you're doing a legacy program, a consistent program. Anytime I say you're doing a legacy program, I mean a consistent program, not just throwing out a couple of marketing campaigns. So when you have a consistent program, you'll likely get maybe even up to 50% of the board. I've even seen up to 50% of the board do a legacy gift in the first, say, 18 months to 2 years of having a mature program, really working on a consistent program, and then with a board giving policy, move into 100% participation. It speaks volumes. It speaks volumes about your organization. So I really recommend that. Okay, your board as solicitor. So this is a gray area. It really depends on your board and their expectations. You will have some board members that don't feel comfortable speaking with donors about gifts. So assuming there's an expectation to get gifts, for them to bring in gifts, and solicit gifts, then the board should have a portfolio of legacy prospects. And that really that's a responsibility of the staff professional to provide that to the board. And that could look so many different ways. That can be once you launch your program and you are starting to build out your solicitation plan, to sit with board members and go through lists of prospects and assigning them who are the individuals that they feel comfortable having the conversation with, whether that's by themselves or with you. So that looks different for every organization, but that's, if there's an expectation that they are to ask for other gifts, then they should have legacy gifts on there as well. But even without the expectation to get gifts, they should be expected to solicit each other on the board. So if you're starting to do a legacy giving program and you are going to be speaking with your board members about their own commitment, there should not be self-solicitation for legacy gifts. You should have someone on the board speak to another member on the board, even if you know that they're going to do the gift. They're doing the legacy gift. It's not going to be a hard conversation. But number one, it will get your board used to having conversations about legacy giving, which is important, especially if you want them to start to speak with other donors outside of the board. And it really should be a conversation within the board, peer-to-peer, because these are very impactful gifts, and these are really meaningful gifts, and it's personal, and it really should come from another board member. It shouldn't be a board member just raising their hand and saying, "Sure, I'll do a legacy gift." Even if they do that, make sure someone follows up from the board to have a conversation with that other board member about their gift. So one thing to think about also is, what's your board style? So again, this is different for every organization. And even within your board, you may have board members that have a different style and how they like to gather information, have reporting to them, being involved. So I picked two main ones that I see quite often. So you may have the ones that are very interested in numbers, right? All about the numbers. And then you may have boards that are very interested in mission. I'm going to give a quick example how this can differ. I spoke with an organization that they were considering doing an endowment, starting an endowment campaign and building an endowment for their future, which is very important. And the conversation I had with their board was that there are some board members that wanted to support the fiscal viability of the organization for years to come, which is what an endowment can do. Then you have some of the board members that resisted that because they want to encourage donors to give money or funds to be used for mission immediately, not for the future. So there, you have some board members that are thinking about the numbers and how that will help the organization long-term for their fiscally. And then you have others that are related to supporting the everyday mission of the organization. So thinking about that and thinking about your board, and again, your board as a whole may not be in one of these different criteria. They could be split up. So the ones that are interested in numbers, think about what motivates them. And that can be so many different things. So are they motivated by reports of seeing growth, of donors that are coming in that are new to the organization, or donors that you're retaining donors, or donors that if you get into legacy giving, then would they be interested in seeing how many legacy intents come in, or how many legacy gifts are made? So think about what motivates them, what kind of reporting would be interesting to them, what they would react to, right? So when you think about what type of reports interest them, think about what they're getting now, what kind of reports they like now, and then you could think about what kind of legacy reports would be suited to them, that they would be able to really get involved and interested in what you're doing in legacy giving. So think about, are they numbers and results driven? That would change. That would change the way that you are reporting to them on your activities for legacy giving. And then if they're mission oriented, what motivates them for mission? Is it the growth of programs? Maybe, if you're reporting on, well, what kind of reports interest them now? Is it programs, people? So are they more into the storytelling and the mission driven and the results? So are the programs growing? Who are the donors? Who are you reaching? So when you're reporting to them and you're getting them involved in legacy giving, think about, are they interested more in talking about mission and things related to mission, the programs, the people, or are they just thinking about the numbers, like the growth and how many people are you reaching rather than who are you reaching? So let's talk about different ways to involve your board. Now, depending on your board, you will need to adjust your pitch, your reporting, and your training to them. So I have a selected number of ways to involve your board. So this is what you can start with. The reporting, like I mentioned before. A few things I would think about in the reporting is who is doing the reporting? Okay, so when are you doing the reporting? Are you doing the reporting by a memo that's going out to them? Are you doing the reporting at a board meeting? And who is doing the reporting? Is it coming from the executive director? Is it coming from the board chair? Think about everything related to the reporting. And then what are you reporting? So the who, the when, and then the what. So would you be reporting activities in your plan giving program? Are you talking about gift intents? Are you talking about marketing responses? These are the ways to involve board members. So the ones that are really interested in reporting, get them involved in that aspect of it. Okay, so they can sort of take ownership of that and do the reporting for you if that's some way that you can get them involved, if that's their thing. Then for training, I would do solicitation training for your board members. So remember I mentioned that they should not self-solicit each other. They shouldn't allow self-solicitation. They should solicit each other, and they should also potentially speak with other donors. So many board members are not comfortable with that, and so you should train them. And if you have your case statement, if you've done that, then you have the tools to be able to train your board on doing solicitations. And the training also doesn't necessarily only have to be on solicitations. It could be revolved around marketing. If you have someone on the board that's maybe professionally they're involved in marketing, use them to do a training on your marketing materials. Get them involved. That's a really wonderful way to get your board involved in that. Even if they're not taking ownership of that marketing campaign, certainly getting involved would be great, and for them to then report back. Maybe that's part of the reporting that they're doing. So the person that is doing marketing on your board can report back to the rest of the board on that. That is a way of getting them involved. Once they're involved and they're doing the activities, they're taking more ownership of the legacy giving. They can kind of see it come to life. So then you have solicitations. Of course, you're going to have, it's great to involve the board by doing solicitations, and that is certainly something to be thinking about. So that may come from the professional staff to go through the list to determine which people each of the board members should be speaking to, or how many are there that they're giving. Are they giving 5 names to each of them? Is it one person a month? That is something that needs to be looked at. But you could also, and this has been very successful, have someone on the board that is comfortable doing that type of conversation with donors to be the point person on this, and to be the one that can help do the training, as I said in point 2, and then also lead the other board members through the process of doing the solicitations. And of course, usually as staff professionals, we are doing the heavy lifting on the other side and making sure that our board members have the materials that they need, maybe the research that they need, whatever they need to, and also participate in the solicitations with them if that is necessary as well. But this is really an important thing for your board to do if they're willing to do that. Now, committees, you can have a subcommittee of your development committee that does all plan giving or legacy giving. And some organizations, especially larger ones, have a subcommittee of the board of the development committee of the board that is solely on if they have a legacy campaign or a plan giving program. And this is really a very effective tool to get your board members involved. This is where you can maybe have a quarterly meeting and talk to them, the subcommittee, about plan giving activities and show them the results you're having from marketing. Or because when you're looking at your reporting also to the board, your board may not want to see everything. You may not want to show them everything. It may be too much. Maybe they just want to know 1 or 2 figures each time there's a board meeting to report on for plan giving, and they don't want to see everything. But in your subcommittee, This is where you can get more involved in the numbers and the accountability for the organization and getting that support and involvement from your board. So it winds up being a very effective tool when you have a subcommittee. You can also have a recognition committee, which I like to do as part of, it could be part of the plan giving committee, or it could be part of something else. But if you have someone on your board that maybe is really not comfortable having solicitations or having conversations with donors, you can use that individual to call donors and thank them for their legacy gift. And that works out really well. This is actually a really good tool when you have a board member that is maybe not as engaged anymore and sort of falling off to the side and not participating, but you want to re-engage them. Use them if you can, if they're willing to call donors and thank them for their gifts, or handwrite thank you notes. You can give them the template to write. They don't have to think too much about it. Just write out the notes. These are ways to involve your boards in legacy giving, even before you get into like the real solicitations of the gifts. These are smaller ways to get them involved. And then with recognition, like I mentioned, you can do the thank you calls. Perhaps if they have a particular expertise in something, they could be a speaker for an event. So if you have, I've had a board member that was an expert in art. So they did a lunch and learn for donors that were interested in giving artwork. So you can use your board members as speakers also to get them involved and more engaged and see what's going on in the program. And this works really well if they are either numbers oriented or mission oriented. So think about using your board, involving them to either host events. When we can host events, it's really wonderful. They can do a parlor meeting or invite their peers to an event to hear more about legacy giving. So these are just some of the ways to really involve your board in legacy giving to grow out your program. So how do we do this? How do we get our board involved? So there's a few ways. I'm going to share a very effective way to really jumpstart their involvement. So you start with your board chair. This really, and assuming when you start with your board chair, you already have it, you have some sort of plan in place. Okay, you have your goals for your legacy program. You have a plan. You want to start building out your program. Okay, I'm assuming all that, but it's about how to get your board involved. Start with your board chair and have a conversation with the board chair about their commitment. Sometimes the board chair may say, this is great, but I don't want to be involved. If that's the case, find someone else on your board that either has done a legacy gift already that you're aware of, or that you believe that they will do a legacy gift, because whoever you get to start to be your champion needs to have made a legacy gift or does a legacy intent or something like that in the beginning, because they're going to be able to stand up at meetings and say, this is what I've done, please join me. This is important for the organization. So it's always good to start with the board chair, even if that board chair is not interested, but you should start with them first. And then work your way through the executive committee, the development committee, whatever other committees you have. You can keep going. You can go through finance, investment, budget. Not every organization has all these different committees, but go through each committee and find those individuals that may be interested in being supportive of your program, and to find out what level of support they want to be involved in. So I would keep going until you get through everyone on your board and you have conversations with your board. And this is assuming that your board chair also gives the go-ahead, that they don't want to be the point person, that you should go ahead and have conversations with everyone. And then your goal is to find at least one good person that's going to be that ambassador. And when I say good, I mean that they're willing to get up and talk about it. They can stand up at meetings, they can speak with prospects, they'll solicit board members, they will be an active member. So for those that 75% of you that don't have your board that's actively engaged in legacy giving, this is where you start. You get that one person, at least one good person. And I had someone, oh my goodness, she was a client that I work with out in San Diego. They had one board member that would get up at every meeting and solicit everybody at the meeting. And she would walk out of each board meeting with a handful of declarations of intent that were signed. She was so impressive with her passion. And so when you have someone like that, you're good, okay? And you can really then start to work your plan giving program through the rest of the board and build it out for the future. So you start with one and you build out for more. And I will tell you from experience that once you have at least one really good ambassador to your program, you will get more. They will come, they will be interested. Once people start to see that there is success with it and other people on the board are doing it, I don't want to say it's peer pressure, but it's definitely inspirational for them to see this, and they'll start to get engaged. And this is what you want, okay? So you start with one, and then make sure they're willing to talk with other board members and get up at meetings, or be the first person that's doing that reporting. Okay. It could always change out. And you also, of course, like once you have someone, or if you have a committee that's set up, you can rotate people on and off. So, if they're on your committee and they're speaking with prospects about doing legacy gifts, they don't feel like that's their job forever, right? So maybe it's for a year they do that, they rotate off, and you have a new board member come on. So think about how you can frame that within how your board is set up. And you may not be able to have an official committee, but you could at least have like a group of interested board members that are supportive that will be able to do this for you. So by doing this, I absolutely guarantee you're going to change the culture of your organization from transactional giving to philanthropy. You would absolutely need to have your board involved once they are interested. And look, I talked a little bit about boards making gifts, but we didn't talk about the gift planning so much in here, because of course that's important, because that's where you're going to be heading from this, but it's really about sparking an interest in your board to do this type of work. Okay, that you need to get them involved somehow to start to do this work, because much of this work is going to be on us, right? As professionals, that's just the way it is. But you want to be able to utilize your board for support, for inspiration, for accountability, and for also many of the things that they need to do for you to do your job effectively, which are to approve policies, to review gift vehicles that may come in if they're on the committee for the gift acceptance policy, to do all that work, which will really lift up your program. You need to have those in order to scale your plan giving program. Remember, I said a plan giving program is not just a couple of sending out a couple of letters a year. It's building up the framework. And when your board is interested, by doing these small things, it really will change the culture of your board, the way it's made up. And it may take a year or two, but it will start to work if you do all these things consistently. So some key points I wanted to mention, then we have time for questions. Legacy giving is absolutely the best way for your organization to be secure financially for the future, without a doubt, without a doubt. And your board is essential to the growth of your program. So if your board is not interested in your legacy program, it really will have no place to grow. It will be stagnant. It will be dependent on whatever staff is there and whatever resources your staff has to be able to do a program. Your board is the one that's going to allocate resources, staff time, budget, priorities that will allow you to grow the program. So you need your board involved. And if you understand your board's style and their interests, then you can really engage them better in your legacy giving program to be supportive of your activities. And then, of course, for them to be able to make their own gift. So I'm going to pause here for questions. Carolyn, if you're there, if there's any questions.
Yeah, we've got all kinds of great questions, actually. There's a lot of questions about the board members themselves and their legacy gifts. Robin asked, what if they're on more than one board, or they're going to transition off of your board in a few years, and then that next board is also going to have an expectation of a legacy gift?
Right. So, that's like for any donor. So we just don't know. And for most board members, in part of the giving policy, we put in there that we expect that organization is one of their top 3 priority charitable organizations that they support. So I would assume if they cycle off and they're not still a donor to the organization, then they're just not as engaged and they're not the right legacy donor. The donors that, and this is a whole other type of training, but your legacy donors are your most engaged donors, and they will support you with a legacy gift. So, I couldn't say if, they cycle off and they expect to make a gift for another organization. I believe in abundance. And so I do, many people make multiple gifts, legacy gifts to lots of organizations. So I do believe that there is room to make many legacy gifts to many organizations from one person or family. But if they're not obligated, if they don't feel obligated to maintain that gift after they leave, they weren't really the right legacy donor.
Yes, if you love something, set them free. If they come back. Actually, Robin, I had the wrong name on that question. Robin asked, we have several donors who have agreed to give our nonprofit a planned gift. What documentation is needed for their estate executor to honor their wish?
So it should be in their estate documents. I'm not sure what type of gift they're doing, like what vehicle they're doing it, but if it's a bequest in their will, then that would be set in there. If you want to make sure that the gift is irrevocable, that is a little more detailed. I really can't get into that right now, but you can do a gift agreement about that, and to make it the expectation that the gift is irrevocable, even being in one's estate, which can be revocable. So, a gift in someone's will, it can be changed at any time that they redo their will or they do a codicil. But if you have a gift agreement, then that would render it irrevocable. So I hope that, in a nutshell, explains Robin.
Yes. Mark had a great question. Should we be aware of donors who have named us in their will? Or is it enough to set up the program and just hope that people are putting you in their wills without necessarily knowing of every instance?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And as frustrating as it is, many donors, or I should say most donors, will not share that information with you. So the goal of an organization is to educate our donors about legacy giving through marketing and conversations. Those are your two main revenue generators for legacy giving. And within that, to hopefully entice your donors to be part of your legacy society, which would give them recognition and stewardship, and they would tell you that they are, doing some sort of legacy gift or planned gift to you. Of course, if it's a current planned gift, you would have knowledge of that. But if it's something that is a deferred gift or, testamentary gift, and you're not aware of it, then they're, hopefully just through communications and marketing and sharing stories and testimonials of other donors that have made a gift will inspire them to come forward and share that information with you, because it's helpful to have, even if it's revocable.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Pamela asks, is the legacy gift threshold set by the organization or usually more by the donor?
The legacy gift threshold, I think I know what the question is, but I'm not exactly sure. I would need some clarification. If you're thinking like in your gift acceptance policy, you may not accept a gift annuity, for example, below $20,000. But for bequests or gifts that are through estate planning, we don't set a limit because it's not within our control. It's the donor and doing it with their advisors. However, you can set a minimum amount if it's for something that the organization is expected to do. I am being very clunky in the way I'm saying this, but if it's part of a campaign and then there's recognition to name the side of the building, then you may have a certain minimum amount, and that would be agreed upon with the donor. So it just depends. Most of the time, there's not a minimum amount for a legacy gift.
Okay. Kind of related to that, I thought this was interesting. You talked a lot about having the board members solicit each other. So Ruth asked, do the board members disclose amounts to each other or just the fact that they will leave a legacy gift?
So that is up to the board members. That's a very personal decision for any individual, not even board members, but most board members would not reveal the amount, and donors don't need to reveal the amount. You could just have a placeholder when you're reporting on them. So But if you're having a campaign, it changes. And that's when you need to know the amount, because if you're assigning, let's say you're doing an endowment campaign to raise $100 million. You need to know how much is coming in through those gifts to get to your goals, and to also assign specific recognition that you're giving to donors for making those types of gifts. So it really depends. Ordinarily, no, board members wouldn't have to reveal the amount or how it's being made, just that they are doing a gift.
Okay, that makes sense. Patricia asked, what comes first, legacy or endowment?
Well, that's a great question. I like to do them both at the same time, because endowment is really a planned gift, folks. It's really a type of planned gift. And a lot of, fundraisers and even donors don't really understand. I think it's more of a major gift, but it's a planned gift. So I like to build them out at the same time. So as you're building endowment, donors may want to do endowment gifts as their legacy gift. And some donors want to do a bequest, which hopefully, there's some sort of business rule within your organization that when the bequest realizes that if it's unrestricted, that goes into the endowment. So again, they should go at the same time, but essentially what happens is that endowment will grow depending on the focus that is placed on it. So if you want to grow your endowment, the ways to grow it are either endowment campaign, where you're really pushing endowment gifts, and for donors to do gifts towards the endowment, or you are using surplus through planned gifts like bequests that go into your endowment, which will take longer, but that is the long-term and very steady way to do it.
Okay. A lot of people asking about your excellent slide deck here. And yes, we will be sending that along with the replay recording tomorrow. So I know that these are great things to share with your board as you're talking about. Someone was asking to see, I think it was this slide. Okay, so just to review there. One question a lot of people were curious about is they feel like their board members are going to ask, what is the average fee of a lawyer to add a single line of legacy giving to a will? I would imagine that is going to depend a lot on geography and
yes.
Yes.
Let me just jump in there. Your donors are responsible for doing for the expenses involved with doing their legacy gift. So your organization can provide to your donors sample bequest language, and I do that with all my clients. They have sample bequest language that they can have printed up or as something on their website to provide to the donors to bring to their own lawyer to create their gifts. You don't want to have any conflict of interest, so your organization should not pay for any fees involved with your donor creating a legacy gift.
Okay. Again, lots of questions about how to present this to the board. Where can we learn how to explain to possible donors what a legacy gift are and how it works? Yeah, there's kind of an education curve here, I feel like, for donors who might be able and willing to do this, but hadn't really considered it before.
Absolutely. Well, on the last slide that I can share, if you want to learn more, I have a free Facebook group called Legacy Giving Made Simple. And I have, I think, over 1,500 nonprofit professionals in there already. I do trainings all the time, just about weekly trainings on building out legacy giving programs. So feel free to join that group. If you're not a Facebook person, I completely understand. And you can send me an email, because my weekly training call is on Zoom. So if you want to be put on that list, just send me an email, or you can go through Facebook if you want, but if you're not on Facebook, just send me an email and I can send you the link to sign on to our weekly Zoom calls on Tuesdays.
Well, that will be a huge help from the questions I'm seeing here about just how to get started. And I'm a member of your Facebook group, and it's fantastic. You're always in there providing helpful information. One more I want to cover before we start to close down here. Do you recommend earmarking legacy gifts for specific programs or scholarships or things like that? Or not?
I'm going to say it depends. I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. It just depends on how it's done and what you're doing. I really like to, I'm going to try to do a very short answer in the amount of time that we have. If you're promoting certain endowments, I think it's great because that's for, say, a particular purpose. But otherwise, I like to do just unrestricted legacy, or just not necessarily connected with something particular to an organization unless you're doing endowment. And then as you speak with donors, it may wind up being that they wanted to put a restriction on a particular gift or support a particular program or whatever that looks like. But I would be careful in the marketing of being too restrictive in your marketing, because things may change. And that's where I kind of struggle with some organizations, that they put something out there and then a couple of years later it changes. So just be aware of that.
Okay, I'm putting some information here in the chat. Again, lots of people asking for templates, examples, things like that. And I'm just going to direct them to your Facebook group here again. And this slide will be in the deck that we send you tomorrow. But your email address, one more time, Lori at everydayplannedgiving.com.
I am scrolling through the chat right now. I see some people from my group. Hello, folks.
I love to see that when we have people. I noticed some people in the chat mentioned in our previous webinars where we talked about, board members not having a required gift or get, especially when we're talking about diversity and, wanting to make board membership more accessible to people of different income levels. So I guess in this example, they would maybe not be the best candidates for a legacy gift, or how would you address that?
If someone would not be a good candidate for a legacy gift?
For example, board members be of a different economic class than your traditional board member. You can't.
Well, this is why I said that a board member that's engaged can make a legacy gift regardless of the amount. That's why we say it's a personally significant gift. I've seen legacy gifts for $500, and I've seen them for multiple millions of dollars. So from the same board. So that's why we say board members don't need to reveal the amount. And I think, as a board, usually they understand where the capacity is from everyone. So it's a personally significant gift, and it could be private. The amount, it's just the actual making of the legacy gift and indicating that they've done it. That's what speaks volumes, not the amount.
I love that. Yes, because as you said, personally significant is going to be different for all of us, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a variety of different gifts there. So just like the people on our board. Okay, well, we are at the hour now, and I just want to thank you again, Lori. This is such great information. I know everyone's going to love this Facebook group and your slide deck here and all the information you have on your website as well. So thank you so much for teaching us so much today about legacy giving.
Thank you, everyone. And if you want to learn more, come to the group. There's so much information in there.
All right. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us.